Discover a new, in-depth approach to book coverage with this extended summary. Unlike our previous review, which offers a focused analysis, this feature delivers a comprehensive overview tracing the intellectual roots, key arguments, and real-world impact of this subject. If you appreciate this expanded format and find it helpful, let us know. Your feedback will help shape future content.
It's a bold new format. I am ready to get into it.
Absolutely. And to kick things off, I want to throw a concept at you. We all think, right? I mean, it's something we do constantly, like breathing. But here's the hook. Very few of us are actually trained to think.
That's a great point.
We just assume logic is this automatic process happening in the background. But the book we're covering today argues that thinking is, well, it's an art form. It's like playing the piano.
Or painting a portrait, yeah. It requires practice, discipline.
Yeah, exactly. If you just sit down at a piano without any lessons, you're just making noise. The book says the same thing goes for the mind.
And that is the core friction, isn't it? We mistake the biological activity, the neurons firing, for the actual skill of logic. Just because your fingers are moving doesn't mean you're playing music.
And before we unpack that, I need to mention that you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book summaries.
So today, we're exploring Being Logical, a guide to good thinking by D.Q. McInerny.
Right. And this isn't some dry academic text from the 19th century. It was published in 2004. But the author, McInerny, comes from a really heavy-hitting background. He taught logic for decades at Notre Dame, University of Kentucky.
Our Lady of Guadalupe Seminary, too. He wrote this because he saw a very specific gap in our education.
A missing piece, I think he calls it.
He does, and what really stands out is that he isn't writing for philosophers in an ivory tower. He's writing for practitioners. That's you and me.
So it's practical.
It's all about looking at logic not as abstract math, but as a tool for sanity. In a world of information overload and constant noise, this book is about how to distinguish truth from nonsense. It's about wisdom, really.
Sanity is a strong word, but I think by the end of this you'll see why it fits. Let's jump into part one, what McInerny calls preparing the mind.
I love that he starts here.
Me too, because he doesn't start with complex equations or Latin terms. He starts with a simple command. Be attentive.
It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? Just pay attention. But he points out that the phrase pay attention is quite literal. Attention is a currency. It costs energy.
It's an active response.
An active response, exactly. He argues that so many of our reasoning mistakes don't come from being bad at the mechanics of logic. They come from just not looking closely enough at what's in front of us.
He mentions the danger of familiarity, which really stuck with me. We make mistakes in familiar situations, driving to work, talking to our spouses, because we stop looking.
We check out. We trade observation for assumption. We see the outline of a situation, and we just fill in the rest with our memory, not our eyes.
So to be logical, you first have to be present.
You have to be present. And that leads right to the next pillar, getting your facts straight. You just can't have logical thinking if you don't have facts. And he breaks this down into things and events.
Okay, walk me through that distinction. A thing versus an event.
So a thing is an existing entity. It has physical mass. A cat, a table, you can touch it. An event is an action. It happens in time. A coronation, a thunderstorm.
An assassination. He uses that example, right?
Oh.
So if I have a cat in front of me, the fact is easy. I look at it. But what about Lincoln's assassination? I wasn't there. You weren't there. How do we establish that as a fact?
And that's where it gets fascinating. Since we can't directly observe it, we have to rely on indirect evidence. Documents, newspaper accounts from the time, memoirs, reports.
You have to test the evidence.
You have to test it rigorously. And this is where he creates this chain of knowledge that I think is just crucial. It goes objective fact into idea into word.
I want to slow down on that because it really feels like the backbone of his entire argument. So step one, objective fact, the cat in the world.
Right.
Step two, the idea, the image of the cat in my brain. Step three, the word, the label cat that I use to communicate it.
And the integrity of your thinking depends on those links being solid. If the link between the fact and the idea is broken, you're mistaken. If the link between the idea and the word is broken, you're communicating poorly. Or maybe you're lying.
Which brings us to what philosophers call the correspondence theory of truth.
It's very grounding. McInerny's argument is that a statement is true only if its content corresponds to the objective fact. If I say the cat is on the mat, it's only true if there is, in fact, a cat on a mat.
So truth is about existence first and logic second.
Exactly. You can't have a true statement about a fake reality.
And yet, how often do we see people arguing about ideas that have no tether to the real world? They're arguing about step 2 and step 3.
All the time. They're arguing about definitions and feelings without ever checking step 1, the fact itself. McInerny says if you want to be right, you have to drag the conversation back to the objective facts.
Okay, so we have the foundation. Be attentive, get facts. Now we need the rules of the road. Part 2, the basic principles of logic. The first principles.
Right, and he notes that you don't prove these. You use them to prove everything else. They're self-evident.
Let's run through them. First, the principle of identity. A thing is what it is. An apple is an apple. Why does he even need to state something that sounds so obvious?
Because we live in a world that constantly tries to blur those lines. We want things to be what we wish they were. This principle anchors us. It says reality has a specific nature. An apple can't be an orange.
Then there's the principle of the excluded middle. No middle state between being and non-being. A lamp is either on or it's off.
This one trips people up because we love nuance. But he's talking about existence. A statement is true or it's false. There isn't a kind of true.
But hold on, I can hear someone now saying, life isn't black and white, what about gray areas? McInerny tackles this head-on, doesn't he?
He does, and his distinction is brilliant. He admits that real gray areas exist situations where the truth is uncertain to us because we lack data. The lamp is either on or off, but if the door is closed, we don't know. That's a gray area of knowledge.
So the gray is in our mind, not in reality.
Precisely. And he warns against manufactured gray areas. That's when the truth is actually clear, but people create ambiguity because they're too lazy to think or the truth is just uncomfortable.
He has a term for that, evasive agnosticism.
Yes. Claiming you just can't know the truth not because of missing evidence, but to avoid committing to a stance. It's an intellectual cop-out.
That flows right into the principle of contradiction. Something can't both be and not be at the same time in the same respect.
Right. You can't be in New York and Paris at the same instant. And finally, the principle of sufficient reason.
The scientist's best friend.
Absolutely. Everything has a cause or an explanation. Things don't just happen for no reason. Logic demands we look for that cause.
Before we get into the structure of arguments, a quick mention of Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. It's a space-inspiring reflection and rational thought, and it's incredibly valuable for aspiring authors looking to understand structure.
It really is a great resource for seeing these principles in action.
Okay, so let's move to part 3, argument. This is the language of logic. How do we actually build a case? The book brings up the syllogism.
The classic 3-part structure. A major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. The famous one is, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore.
Socrates is mortal. But McInerny stresses that logic isn't just about the math of the sentence. The content matters.
Exactly. A syllogism is like a machine. If you feed it garbage, it will process that garbage perfectly and give you a garbage conclusion. This brings us to the quality of the premises. You need 2 things, truth and relevancy.
Truth seems straightforward enough.
You'd think so, but consider this argument. All dogs have wings. Fido is a dog, therefore Fido has wings. Structurally, that's perfect logic. It's valid, but it's unsound because the major premise is a lie.
So logic can't save you from bad data and relevancy.
The premises have to actually relate to the conclusion. If I argue Pierre is a good musician and Pierre plays football and then conclude, therefore, Pierre is a great quarterback, well, that doesn't work. The pieces don't connect.
A distinction the book makes that I found really helpful, especially for scrolling social media, is the difference between statements of fact and statements of value.
Oh, this is crucial. A statement of fact is objective. Gold is a metal. You can test that. A statement of value is subjective. Gold is beautiful. That's an evaluation. You can't prove beauty the same way you prove metallurgy.
But people try to all the time. They state an opinion as if it's a geometric proof.
And that's where the yelling starts.
We also need to distinguish deduction from induction. The Socrates example is deduction going from the universal to the particular. It gives us certainty, but induction goes the other way.
Correct. Induction moves from particular observations to a general conclusion. It's how science often works. I see 1,000 white swans, so I conclude most swans are probably white. Notice the difference. Deduction yields certainty. Induction yields probability.
So if I see 2 rude people in a city and conclude everyone in this city is rude.
That's horrible induction. Your sample size is way too small.
Okay, so if logic is this clear, why are we so bad at it? Part 4 of the book covers the sources of illogical thinking, and these are attitudes. the enemies of reason.
And the first is one we see everywhere, skepticism. Now, a little skepticism is healthy, but McInerny talks about permanent skepticism, the person who says, we can never really know anything.
It's self-refuting, isn't it?
Completely. If you say there is no truth, you're making a statement that you claim is true. It eats itself.
Then you've got the twin traps of cynicism and naive optimism. How does the book frame them as logical errors?
It frames them as filters that blind you. The cynic sees only the negative evidence. The optimist sees only the positive. Both are flawed because they've already made up their mind before looking at the facts. They aren't observing reality, they're just projecting.
And then there's the big one, emotion.
He draws a hard line here. Emotion cannot substitute for reason, and this is key. Sincerity is not a test of truth. You can be weeping with conviction and still be completely wrong. Your intense feeling doesn't change the objective facts.
That's a hard pill to swallow in a culture that really values speaking your truth.
It is, but McInerny would say there isn't your truth. There is just the truth. Your feelings about it are valid as feelings, but they don't alter the facts.
Which leads us perfectly into part 5, the fallacies. I like to call this the toolkit of nonsense. Let's run through the big ones. First up, the straw man.
A classic. You take your opponent's argument, you twist it into a weaker, goofy version of itself, a straw man, and then you beat that up instead of their actual point.
So if I argue we should rethink the school budget, a straw man would be.
Oh, so you hate education and want children to be illiterate. I've taken your point, twisted it, and attacked the twisted version.
Then there's the ad hominem, to the man.
Attacking the person, not the argument. You're wrong about the economy because you dress badly. It's irrelevant, but it works because it distracts.
Speaking of distraction, the red herring.
Right, named after dragging a smelly fish across a trail to distract hunting dogs. In an argument, you just introduce totally irrelevant information. We're talking about the budget. Well, what about the emails from 5 years ago?
It's an escape hatch. And what about one I think social media has made worse? The democratic fallacy.
The idea that if the majority believes it, it must be true. But truth isn't a vote. For a long time, the majority believed the sun revolved around the earth. They were all wrong.
We also have post hoc ergo propter hoc. Fancy Latin for
After this, therefore because of this. Assuming that because B happened after A must have caused B. I wore my lucky socks, my team won, therefore my socks caused the win. It's confusing correlation with causation.
and the false dilemma. I see this in headlines constantly.
Oh, it's the favorite tool of sensationalism, pretending there are only two options. Either you agree with my plan, or you want the country to collapse. It tries to bully you into a corner by hiding all the other options.
The book also mentions using tears or laughter as a diversion.
Yes. If I can't answer your logic, I might mock you. Or I might burst into tears to get sympathy. Either way, I've avoided the argument. It's just theater.
There's one final fallacy I want to highlight because it feels so modern. The quantifying of quality.
This is a profound point. We are obsessed with data, with measuring everything, but McInerny warns that trying to measure quality with numbers is a fallacy. You can't put a number on love or freedom or justice.
I love you, 4.5 out of 5.
Exactly. When we try to force these things into a spreadsheet, we lose their actual meaning. We try to measure the immeasurable.
So after all this, what does it all mean? It feels like a lot of heavy lifting.
It is work, but it means that logic is about accountability. That's really the core of being logical. It's about matching our minds to the objective world, accepting that reality is what it is, not what we wish it was.
So it's a discipline. And the payoff is huge.
The payoff is sanity. That is the thought I want to leave everyone with. Logic is synonymous with sanity. To be logical is to be fully human and fully awake to the world as it actually is. When we abandon logic, we are. Well, we're drifting away from reality itself. Logic is the anchor that keeps us grounded.
That's a powerful place to land. If you want to really sharpen these skills, you need to go deeper. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book critique. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
It has been a pleasure exploring this with you.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.